So now we're going to move on and talk a little bit about inclusivity. So inclusivity is a term that I'm sure many of you have heard about, but it's really an important critical part of being a health coach, and for many of the reasons that we discussed in this last lecture, right? Of making sure that we are able to provide our clients with health equity. And so ACE certified health coaches are actually obligated to ensure fair and equal treatment for each client without bias, preference, or discrimination based on gender, ethnic background, age, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, or physical disability. It's actually included in the ACE Code of Ethics because it states that all professionals are to provide this equal and fair treatment to all clients. So it's important that you understand that this isn't just a recommendation. This is actually something that ACE is saying that if you go through and you become a certified ACE health coach, this is part of our code of ethics and you're agreeing to these part of the code of ethics. So there's some practical strategies that we can use to ensure inclusivity for our clients. And there's a number of them, and I'm actually going to spend a little bit of time on each of these so you really understand them, okay? So the first thing that we can do to really help foster an inclusive environment is to create a safe, or otherwise known as brave, space. So it is impossible for health coaches to understand the intricacies of each client's culture, right? We know that. So therefore, a health coach should acknowledge that the client is the expert on their culture, right? We have been saying that the clients are the experts of their own health, including their own cultural backgrounds. And so we need to be able to use these strategies to foster that inclusive environment. So first, it's really important to note that we cannot guarantee a safe space. And so this is something that's important to realize, that safe space, that terminology is used a lot in different settings, and you've probably heard it before. I just want to create a safe space. And the intentions are really positive, right? People are meaning well by saying that phrase. But I think there's also an important point to bring up, is that we can't, as health coaches, say, I promise I'm going to create a safe space, because you never know what can happen. And so there's sort of a movement right now to try to change that terminology a little bit from safe space to brave space. Because really what we want is we want to create an environment where our client feels physically and psychologically comfortable enough to open up and be brave. So that's a really important distinction. So your book uses the term safe space, but I just wanted to bring that up to you all and say, using the terminology of brave space, I think, is more so where we're going in this industry, and something for you all to be aware of. Okay, so there's some things to think about, and a lot of these we've talked about, right? So creating a brave space can include making sure that people are comfortable, right? So it could be you sitting across the chair from each other, and maybe some people might feel comfortable with there being a desk between the two of you, and some people might feel a little bit more comfortable with that. So maybe you're both on one side of the desk and you're facing each other in chairs. So these are things that it's really important you actually ask your client. Hey, I wanted to make sure that I'm creating this really brave space for you. What's the most comfortable? Would you like me to be behind there? Would you like me to be kind of over on this side? I want to make sure that you feel comfortable in this environment. Okay. Another thing is that we can use open-ended questions to help our client feel emotionally brave, right? So that we can encourage them to continually talk about themselves and their experiences. The second strategy here is to be a guide and not an expert. And I hopefully by now, right, I'm hoping that you all know that we are not the experts. I don't know how many times I've said that, right, in my lectures. We are not the experts of our clients' lives. We are not the experts of the things that are going to work for them. They are. So for a successful and an inclusive client-health coach relationship, the health coach should avoid being that expert, right? We want to put away that writing reflex that we have, okay, that exists. Instead, we should help our client discover what works for them, because they are the experts in their own lives. Another strategy is to listen and ask. We often really get excited to share information, and I completely understand that. And it's because we, went to this seminar, and so now we have kind of the latest evidence-based practices for whatever it is that we're trying to work on with our client, okay? But we need to remember that we need to listen to our clients, right? So a successful health coaching practice involves active listening. So if a client is reluctant to readily share information, it is our role as a health coach to figure out a way to draw information and really to incite that conversation, right? And this is often done via open-ended questions, okay? Remember, silence can actually be really, really effective to help someone speak a little bit more about the topic, okay? So remember, the third strategy here is to listen and ask. The fourth strategy is to respect that this is the client's time. A health coach is responsible for helping clients express their feelings and ideas without divulging their own personal issues. By practicing mindfulness, health coaches can actually work on diminishing their desire to share personal information. And you by now are hopefully thinking like, well, duh, I'm not going to share my information. But it can come without you realizing it, right? Especially for those clients that you really get to know that become similar and closer to friends than clients, because that can happen over time. And so it could be tempting to bring up things that are more related to you and to talk about you and things going on in your life. But I highly suggest that you check that, because remember, this is the time for your client to really explore the things that are important to them regarding their health. And then the last strategy is to practice and master nonverbal communication skills. And we go over this a lot in lab, right? So nonverbal cues are imperative to building support, rapport, and trust. Mirroring is a method of subtly mimicking behavior during communication. I see a lot of you do this, right? So if someone is crossing their legs, you'll all of a sudden see yourself cross your legs a few seconds later. So other examples include, standing or sitting the way that your client does, like I just mentioned, maybe leaning forward or backwards. One of the things I think is really cool is I watch you all. Sometimes if your client is here, right, and they lean forward and they have their hand here, all of a sudden I'll see you do this on the other side, right? Or vice versa. If they lean back, right, then you go ahead and lean back. That's a really important skill to use as a coach. We also want to increase or decrease our speed or our pitch of our voice. We can repeat a phrase back to our client. So that's another great way of kind of mirroring our client. Use the specific language, specific words that they're using. So that sometimes even helps our clients hear it a little bit better than just coming from their own mouths. So now let's discuss establishing and enforcing boundaries. So an element of the ACE Code of Ethics is to establish and maintain clear professional boundaries. And this is actually incorporated as part of that coaching agreement. So if you remember writing that coaching agreement in one of the original labs, this is some of the language that's included in there. And it's important to recognize that there are other important aspects of maintaining professional boundaries that may not explicitly be in that contract. And so I want to bring this up because in our industry, it's very common for, like I mentioned earlier, our clients to almost become our friends, especially if you've been working with them for quite some time, or even vice versa. They were your friends first, and then eventually they became your client because they know what you do and you're skilled and they want to work on their health behaviors. And so this can be kind of that tricky thing. And so it's really important that if that more personal relationship exists, that you discuss with that person that during that time period, maybe it's an hour, during your hour coaching session, that you are wearing your coaching hat. I use that terminology, but it helps people understand that. And that you are no longer their friend, you are no longer their sister. If it's your sister that's working with you, you are the health coach. And so they can sort of almost expect to have an experience that's slightly different than their normal friendship or more personal experience with you. Another thing to recognize with this is that depending on where you go with your professional boundaries is that if you become more friendly with your client and you establishes to become more friends, they might see that as opportunities to reach out to you more and to ask you questions more outside of normal coaching hours, in which case that becomes tricky because do you charge them for that or you don't? And so those are all really important things to kind of discuss and for you to be really transparent about. So if you can recognize that it's happened ahead of time, great. Have that conversation with that person so that you all are on the same page. Now let's talk about client confidentiality. An element of the ACE Code of Ethics is also to maintain the confidentiality of all clients and participant information. Clients have the right to expect that all of their personal information, including the conversations with us as health coaches, will remain confidential unless there has been express written content or consent, okay? And if health information is discussed with colleagues, this must be done so in private. So where this really comes into play is more of that kind of clinical setting when you have multiple team members that are existing. But even so, if you run your own private practice and say you are, have a nice referral network of other medical and health professionals, it's really important that those conversations are done so in a way that protects your client's confidentiality. And it's also important to bring up the HIPAA Act, so Health Insurance Portable and Accountability Act. It's a U.S. law that provides privacy standards to protect patients' medical records and other health information. So if a client requests their health information be shared with the health coach is required to keep the information in a secure and place and ensure confidentiality. Okay? For an electronic health record, EHR, which is actually also known as an electronic medical record, if you heard of that, EMR, this means that storing only password-protected files on a computer. Okay, all hard copies should be kept in a locked file cabinet and restricted in that facility. So because more and more health coaches are starting to find employment in these kind of HIPAA-covered entities, and you would know, if you go and get a position somewhere, there's actually training that goes on that says you are a HIPAA facility. So because more and more coaches are starting to find employment in these HIPAA-covered entities, it's really important that we understand kind of the legality behind it and that we adhere to these HIPAA regulations. So let's pause here and do a quick learning recap. The first question is, are ACE certified health coaches required to be inclusive? Required is the key there. Second, what are the 5 strategies to ensuring inclusivity? And then lastly, what does a health coach need to consider regarding their client's confidentiality? We will pause here and I will see you for the next lecture.